So Ed and I were at Vicky's Diner, which used to be Lee's Diner. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we were there having breakfast when Ed pitched the idea of the Undo series. Things that Jesus would want to undo in our lives today, things that have kind of gone out of control. And he's talking about the scriptural basis and his motivation, his inspiration. He says, Amy, do you have any thoughts about a topic that you might want to do? And I didn't. Honestly, I wait for divine inspiration because I'm just not that good at that stuff. So I said I'll pray about it, see what hits me, and we'll see what happens. But nonetheless, on the way out, I noticed that at Vicky's, they have now added these huge flat screen TVs. And they have them turned on to those 24-hour news programs. And there was this generic title at the bottom of it, outrage over something. And I rolled my eyes and I looked at Ed and I said, you know what? I ought to do it on rage. Because have you noticed that there's a lot of rage out there? I mean, all you have to do is turn on those 24-hour news programs. They are filled with people who are very angry and behaving badly. There's parents behaving badly for whatever reason. There's athletes and sports fans behaving badly. There's celebrities, politicians, even police who are lashing out, filled with it on these 24-hour news programs. You'll even find nature and animals behaving badly. You ever watch Shark Week? Those guys are mad. They are mad. I understand they're sharks. They do not need to be that bitey. They are pissed. They are very upset. It's true. And what I've realized about myself is when I watch those programs, I get angry. I get angry at people who are angry. It's contagious. And I know I'm not the only one. This is a phenomenon that people know about. And on average, if you look at the top three 24-hour news programs, in no particular order, there is MSNBC, Fox, and CNN. So during prime time, there's about 4.65 million viewers. 4.65 million people watching those programs and getting angry about the anger that's on the program. And that's a lot of anger. And Jesus wouldn't want that. That wasn't the purpose of anger. And that's what we're going to look at today. You see, as a society, we've learned to tolerate anger. It doesn't really faze us anymore. And I know that it wasn't always this way. And I know that because they have actually had to add 11 new words to our vocabulary to describe this new phenomenon of rage. 11 new words, and here's what they are. Road rage, which I'm sure everybody knows about, that's pretty standard. Vending machine rage, when it doesn't give you change, it takes your money, or the best one is when your chips kind of go right against the glass and you don't get them and you just shake it, right? Parking lot rage, which are those people who double park so they don't get their car dinged, or if somebody steals your space, or if it's your car that gets dinged. Video game rage, I don't know much about, I don't play them. Sports rage, that's both the athletes and the sports fans. Laundry room rage, when somebody steals the last dryer, or even worse, takes your stuff out, puts it on top so that they can have your dryer or washer, right? Air rage, which covers any kind of rage in airports. There's a lot there. Grammar rage, I had no idea. Computer rage, roid rage, and my favorite, breakfast no longer available rage. Right? About 10:30, 11 o'clock when you're ready for breakfast and they don't have it. Now, personally, I think they should make it an even dozen. There's 11 of them. But I'm going to suggest we add another one, Comcast rage. Anybody there with me? Please, please, Comcast rage, because that's my problem. I have an issue with Comcast. And I didn't even talk about the big rages that have plagued our society for years. Differences in race, religion, sexuality, gun control, and a host of other topics that people get very angry about. Now, these are all types of social rage, which is different from how it used to be. Social rage is when people take out their anger publicly. They don't just seethe in their room anymore. They take it out publicly. Now, this can range from bad behaviors publicly, people screaming and kicking things, violent outbursts publicly, or bombings and shootings publicly. They have become so frequent that this time and age has now been labeled the age of rage. That's how common it is. It's so incredibly common, which is scary because scientists note that it is in fact contagious. People get angry at angry people, and they call it rage flu. Another word that's been added for this new phenomenon. But I have good news. Today we are getting vaccinations. We are going to learn how to use anger. Shot. No, we're not doing that. Sorry. I can't wait till we get this stage, because anybody who gives me a mic knows that I turn into Lady Gaga. So I'm just warning you now, that is going to happen. It's not going to be pretty, but I'll enjoy it, right? We're going to learn how to use it. What was the purpose? And we're going to figure out how we can use this to make our lives better. So in your notes, turn to, this is Roman numeral number 1. Rage is anger that has escalated out of control. Rage is anger that is escalated out of control and can cause irreparable damage. So it's important to note that rage doesn't just happen. It is seated in anger that escalates to rage. Now, there are guaranteed three things that will anger you and can lead to rage. And these are also in your notes, and I'll explain what they are. Number 1, things don't go your way. It means you have expectations. And I want you to understand that this is not like a toddler stomping their foot. As adults, you may have planned for something. You may have saved up money for something. You have a clear expectation for whatever reason. You have an expectation, and that's not met. That'll make you angry and can quickly go to rage. The second one, people don't agree with you. People don't agree with you. So this assumes you have opinions, right? And I put a word next to this that you may not have heard, but it's a term that they use in psychology, and it's become a little bit more popular. It's called confirmation bias. And I'll explain what that is. So we found out that people will form opinions very early on. So when they are introduced to a particular topic, they'll form an opinion on it very quickly. But from that point on, what happens is that everything you hear and everything that you think about gets changed to support your opinion. It's the idea, have you ever heard that people only listen to what they want to hear? You ever heard that? That's confirmation bias. And I'll give you a perfect example. In Texas in the 1800s, there was this push to add Spanish into the school system. So they were going to add the Spanish language. Kids would learn Spanish very early on. And the governor at the time strongly opposed this, did not want it. Very educated person. And when he was asked about his reason as to why we wouldn't want to add that language to the school system, he said, well, if English was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. There's a problem with that. Now again, he's an educated man. He knows Jesus did not grow up in the United States or Canada or England or any other English-speaking country. He probably knows that English wasn't even around during the time of Jesus. Didn't come about until 5th century AD. But nonetheless, he knows those things. That doesn't fit his opinion. And so his brain puts together things to support this opinion, and he himself believes the lie. Doesn't even know it's a lie. Of course Jesus spoke English. We all should speak English. But it wasn't true. That's confirmation bias. Number 3, you don't get what you deserve, the entitlement factor. So you have an idea of what is fair. In your mind, you say, this is what's fair, this is what I deserve. You feel entitled to that portion. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Fair is actually an opinion. It's an opinion. So kind of give you an idea of where we're going here. So we are actually going to be looking at the story of Jonah. And if you have a Bible like the one that we give out here, it's going to be on page 645. If you don't have a Bible, we give them out for free in the back. They are yours to keep. We are going to camp out in Jonah for most of this talk today. So you can use those connection cards as a placeholder. Just pop them in there. We're going to start talking about Jonah. See, Jonah gives a perfect example of all three things that occur. He has expectations, he has opinions, and he feels he deserves certain things. And he gets angry. And this is going to show us how biblically we are supposed to use anger. Jonah is a prophet, but honestly, there's only one statement in the entire book of Jonah that is a prophetic statement. Really, what this story represents are the attitudes of the Israelites towards other nations. See, at the time, the Israelites were God's chosen people. And through the Abrahamic covenant, they were supposed to be a blessing to other nations. But that's not what happened. See, over time, they harbored anger and hatred towards the other nations, and their opinion was that God should just wipe them out. Just wipe them out. We don't need to be a blessing to them. God will just wipe them out. So we're going to start at Jonah chapter 1. This is verses 1 to 3 on page 645 in your Bibles. The word of the Lord came to Jonah. So God is telling Jonah, this is your command. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. So he wants him to go to God wants Jonah to go to Nineveh, tell them, hey guys, you're messing up. This is the word of God. This is what he expects from you. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. You see, the Israelites are cared for and blessed by God. In turn, they're to do the same for others. They're supposed to take care of these other nations in order to spread God's word. That's the whole purpose. But you can imagine the other nations, they don't listen. They don't change their ways easily. No one likes to be told they're wrong. Anyone here like to be told they're wrong? I don't. So over time, the Israelites say, forget it. We're done. We want all the benefits of being God's chosen people, but we don't want to do any of the work because they don't listen, and they're not appreciative anyway. Their expectations quickly turn to anger and hatred towards the other nations that they're supposed to be blessings to. And Jonah does not want to care for the people of Nineveh. He doesn't want to follow God's instructions. Instead, he gets angry, he runs away, not just from God, but from his entire family and friends. He has expectations. He expects to live a blessed life according to what he wants. But that doesn't happen. Jonah believes that the people of Nineveh should just be wiped out. They don't deserve God's love, and Jonah doesn't deserve to be bothered. God doesn't agree. So, okay, well, that's Jonah. How does this apply to us? So I want you to imagine that you are invited to a fundraiser, and it's a chicken dinner, okay? So you pay for your ticket, and you go into this chicken dinner feast, and there's 100 pieces of chicken on the table, 100 pieces of chicken. But you also notice there's 100 people who have paid to eat this chicken dinner. So 100 people, 100 pieces of chicken, how many does each person get? What's fair? Come on, math-tastic people. 1, thank you so much. I knew it. Everybody, it's fair. Everybody should get 1 piece. So let's say you watch a family of 4 step up to that chicken dinner plate, and they take 25 pieces. 25 pieces. So now we had 100 pieces of chicken. They took 25. This is a math problem. How many's left? You guys are good. You got it. There were 100 people who needed to eat. 4 of them now ate. How many people have to eat now? 96. 96 people, 75 pieces of chicken. That's not fair. That is not right. Who would actually say something to the family of 4? Anybody? I mean, you don't have to be mean. You can just walk up to them and be like, hey, I don't know if you realized there's 100 pieces of chicken, 100 of us. We only get one. And who would actually say something? Anyone? Good, I'm sending you. So you guys are going to go. You're going to go to the family of 4 and be like, look, I know you're hungry and the chicken looks good, but there's only 100 pieces and there's 100 of us. So really, technically, we should only get one. So the family of 4 turns to you and says, yeah, but we spent money for this chicken, and for the money we spent, we feel we should get 25 pieces. That's what we should get. We're not putting it back. And then they lick all 25 pieces so no one else can eat them. How many of you guys would be mad at that family of 4? That's not right. That's not fair. It's not fair. But here's what's scary. If we look at the entire population of the earth, if we counted every single head on the planet Earth, only 4.4% are American. Only 4.4%. But as a nation, we consume 25% of Earth's resources. 25%. We are the family of 4. We're Jonah. We are Jonah. We are incredibly blessed as a nation. We have more than we need, but we don't like to share with other people. We don't want to be bothered with the suffering of other people. In fact, we get angry if our expectations are not met. We paid good money for this 25%. We deserve it. We deserve it. And if anybody sees it differently, we get angry at that. Now, here's the scary thing. On average, in the United States, we waste 150,000 tons of food a year. 150,000 tons. We don't even eat all the chicken. We throw it away. But yet we still get angry. We are just like Jonah. When we are confronted with what we should do, we get angry. But we don't have to get on a boat. We can just get on our phones. There's an app for that. We get distracted. But anger is not the problem. Anger is not the problem. It's what you do with it that becomes the problem. So we know why we get angry. We talked about the 3 reasons. But what exactly, how does rage hurt us? So let's take a look at the bullet point. Rage leads to regret. Rage leads to regret by shutting down your ability to reason. Shutting down your ability to reason. You see, anger is one of the 4 basic emotions that we are born with. We are all born with anger, fear, joy, and sadness. God equipped us with anger for a very specific reason. Now, initially, when you get angry, here's your science lesson for the day. When you get angry, initially, that emotion stems from that core part of the brain, the fight or flight. Oh, we got a picture of it. That's the limbic system, the one in red. Now, that's your fight or flight. So let's say you put your hand on a hot stove. Immediately, you take it off. That's your limbic system at work. You don't think about, man, this kind of hurts. Do I want it on there? Nah, probably not. I'll take it off. You don't have to put any thought into that. It's bam. So when you get angry, that's the immediate reaction you have. But it's not to physical pain. It's to emotional pain. It's not physical. It's emotional. And emotional pain is not so obvious as to what is causing the pain. And for that reason, you need to use the next portion of your brain, that outside portion, which is where reasoning can occur. All of your senses get combined, so you take into account what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're doing, what you're feeling. And you also have access to your memories. Was this person late before? Or is this the only time they've been late? Should I be worried or should I be angry? That's where you're reasoning out, is it right to be angry? But here's the trick. When you let anger spin up, it shuts down the external portion of your brain. You can't reason it out. You are incapable of rational behavior because you don't have access to that part of your brain. You don't. So, you have to stop and figure out, why is this pain happening? So in Jonah's anger, back to Jonah's story, he fled from God and boarded a boat. Now he knows he can't get away from God on a boat. He can't even hide from God on a boat. That's not going to work. But at this point, he is unreasonable. He's leaving everything behind, his job, his house, his family, his friends, all of it. He's leaving all of that behind. He's going to regret it. What he does is when he boards the boat, he goes below deck and falls asleep. The boat hits a storm, this raging storm, and they wake everybody up in the boat. They say, all right, everybody start praying. Pray to whatever God that you follow. It doesn't matter. Hopefully one of them's going to work. But Jonah knows he did it. It's his fault. And he regrets it. His actions now have affected all those people on the boat. And they don't deserve it. He knows that it's him. Let's take a look at Jonah chapter 1, verses 12 to 15. You should still be there. It's page 645. Pick me up and throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Instead, the men did their best to row back to the land. But they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Now, here's something you should know, that even the military will tell you. It is very hard to get people to kill people. It's very hard. It's not our nature. It's counter to our nature. And so when Jonah says, go ahead and throw me overboard, they know he's going to die, and they don't want to do it. It goes against their nature. But it doesn't work. So then they cried out to the Lord, please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased. And they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. You see, even in our anger, we are responsible for our response to that anger. We can't blame anger for the way we act. But when you are angry, that is not the time to act or even to speak. That is not when you should be talking or acting. You need to take time to let reason return. So you have access to the tools that God gave you to figure out, what is hurting me? What is the true nature of this anger? Communications itself cannot happen when you're angry. You cannot communicate effectively when you are angry. It is physically impossible. And you might be saying, well, I've said plenty of stuff in anger. It's perfectly possible. No. Those are not words. Those are weapons. When you're angry and you're communicating, those are weapons. You been there? When you're talking to somebody and you can just tell that they're not listening, that their whole brain is dedicated to, okay, how am I going to prove them wrong or hurt them just as badly as they hurt me? It's not communication. Here's your next bullet point. Anger can hinder your relationship with God and with one another. It can hinder your relationship with God and one another. But it can be used to refine your relationship. It can be used to refine your relationships. And this is truly the purpose of anger. Now, you don't need to turn there. I'm going to read it for you because I don't want you to lose your place. This is Proverbs chapter 17, verse 9. You don't need to turn there. I'll read it for you. It says, whoever would foster love covers over an offense. Whoever would foster love covers over an offense. So what that means is whoever uses anger to grow love can actually heal. You can heal. You can make that relationship better. But whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. Whoever repeats the matter, who fires back immediately, is really going to create a greater divide. It's a choice. So what are you supposed to do? Well, after you've been angry, or after you're angry, really what you need to do is stop, think about the true nature of the anger. Why am I angry? What hurt me? What hurt me? And then you need to start the conversation like this with the person. You say, I love you. I love you. And I want this relationship to grow. So you're establishing how important the relationship is. And then you say, but when you do this, it makes me feel like this. How do we get past it? How do we get past it? And that's how you foster love out of anger. Jonah does the same thing. But what does he do to refine his relationship? He's thrown overboard, but he is temporarily saved by a fish that eats him. And he repents and cries out to God. He reaffirms his faith. He says, God, you're God, I'm not, I'll listen. And it removes that relational roadblock. So this is Jonah chapter 2, verses 7 to 9. We're still on page 645, and we're going to start on 646. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. So as he's dying, he realizes, he's God, I'm not. This really isn't how I should behave. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. I will say salvation comes from the Lord. So he agrees, all right, I will listen, God. You are right. I am wrong. I gotcha. So Jonah recommits himself to God, and God tells him again, all right, well, go to Nineveh. Go ahead and preach my word. And this time Jonah follows. Takes us to Roman numeral 2 in your notes. Use anger the way God intended. Use anger the way God intended as a relational early warning system. We have to remember that the two greatest commandments, love God, love each other, those both involve relationships. So those 4 basic emotions help us with relationships. If we stop and reflect on the anger and analyze what is the true nature of the hurt, your anger will naturally subside. You can't be angry and analyze at the same time. So your anger starts to die down. And it also tells you those relational roadblocks, the things that are keeping you from fully realizing that connection to a person. So keep your connection card in 645, but we're going to flip real quick to page 816. Page 816. This is Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 to 29. And this is really where it spells out how we're supposed to deal with anger. This is what it says. In your anger, do not sin. In your anger, do not sin. It basically says don't act in anger. Do not act in anger. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. It has nothing to do with the day, has nothing to do with don't go to bed angry. It's about not being a sin counter. You ever been that person who doesn't say anything, like you make them angry, but they don't say anything. Instead, they write it down or mentally write it down, and they're like, and then he did that, and then he did that, Oh, wait till we get into a fight. I've got ammo like nobody's business. That's what they're talking about. You need to work through the anger rather than storing it up as ammo. Anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands, that they may have something to share with those in need. Essentially, it means you should overextend yourself. If you have done something to somebody else, if you have harmed them in some way, you need to overextend yourself to make amends. It says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. Do not speak. Do not act. Do not speak. But only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So how do we do that? You say, I love you. I want this relationship to work. I want it to grow. But when you do this, it makes me feel like this. How do we get past it? How do we get past it? Here's your bullet point. Remove yourself temporarily from the source of anger. Remove yourself temporarily from the source of anger and honestly think about the reason. Think about the reason that you are truly angry. Remember, anger comes from an emotional pain. So you have to identify what it is that's causing you that pain. So maybe this is just me, but you ever notice when you're running late, the slowest people possible get in front of you? It happens every single time for me. Every single time. One time I was taking my son to a soccer game, and we were late. And I'm a slow talker when I get angry. So at this point, the person in front of me is making me very angry, and I'm saying, Go. I'm a slow talker. You can't possibly go that slow. Move. I can't believe we're doing 50 and a 55. As if they can possibly hear me. But then my son turns to me and says, hey, Mom, speed limit's 40. I was like, oh, here I am yelling at them. I'm angry at them. It's not their fault. They're going 10 miles over the speed limit. I'm late. It's my fault. But in that moment, that is the last thing I want to admit. I don't want to say, this is my fault. Drive as slow as you want. It's my fault. It's not going to happen. But even if it's not us, if it's not our fault, if somebody honestly did something to hurt us and we're angry, the funny thing is, most of the time, you're not angry about the thing you're actually angry about. Most of the time, it's not what you think that's making you angry. So you have to stop and think about what is the true nature. And we're going to see that in Jonah. So we're going to go back to Jonah, page 646. So after Jonah proclaims the message of God to the people of Nineveh, they repent. They say, oh, this is great. They turn to God and sincerely worship God. But Jonah gets angry. He gets angry because he doesn't feel they deserve the same love and forgiveness that he gets from God. Now, what you need to pay attention to is God's response to the anger. It commands us to reflect on the cause of anger. So let's take a look. This is Jonah chapter 3, verse 10, and then we're going to skip to chapter 4, verses 1 to 4. This is what it says. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, that's Nineveh, the people of Nineveh, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. But to Jonah, this seemed very wrong, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord, isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? This is what I was trying to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, this is important to note. Jonah knows this about God. He understands the nature of God. He says he's gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. But listen to his next statement. Now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. But the Lord replied, wait for it, is it right for you to be angry? God's saying, think about it. Do you have a right to be angry at me right now? See, Jonah's expectations were very different from his understanding of God. He knew the nature of God. He's a forgiving God. But yet he expected to wipe him out. Wipe him out, God. Who should he really be angry at? It's not God. Generally, when you're angry at God, I can almost guarantee it's not God. God's not the problem. One of the downsides of worshiping the one true God is that you can't get a second opinion. If you think God's wrong, you can't ask somebody else. Doesn't work that way. Chances are it's you. But remember the three reasons people get angry. Things don't go your way, people don't agree with you, and you don't get what you deserve. Jonah wanted the people destroyed. He knew God's nature. That's not God's nature, but it didn't fit with his expectations. God wanted him to think about his anger and the source. Did Jonah truly have a right to be angry? No, it wasn't that God didn't do what he's supposed to do. It's that Jonah listened to the opinions of others and formed his own opinion that went against the nature of God. And there's your confirmation bias. He knows the nature of God, but yet he still believes God should wipe him out. Here's your next bullet point. Forgiveness isn't an option. Forgiveness isn't an option, but a requirement in all relationships. A requirement in all relationships. We need to remember that we are sinners. We mess up all the time. And God forgives us, people forgive us, and in the same, we have to forgive other people. Not for their sake, for our sake, because it frees us from the resentment and the anger that can build up. It keeps us from being that sin counter. Now, that does not mean that we have to have a relationship with everybody who treats us badly and makes us angry. The best option may be to love that person from afar. That may be your best option. But forgiveness is not an option. Forgiveness is not an option. If that person's unwilling to adjust their behavior, so be it. So be it. You may have to remove yourself from the situation. We're going to take a look at pages 688 and pages 689. This is Matthew chapter 18, verses 23 to 35. Now, I'm not going to read this entire passage because I think the main point, the model for how we're supposed to forgive is in the very, very beginning. So I'm only going to read so far down. This is Matthew chapter 18, verses 23 to 35. Page 688 is where it starts. It says, "Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him." Now, 10,000 bags of gold pretty much means he can't pay him back. It's a gajillion dollars. He can't pay him back. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and that all he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, didn't say pay me back later, says just forget about it, don't worry about it, and let him go. And I'm going to stop there because that is the model we're supposed to follow. The king is God. We are the servant. We can't possibly ever pay back God. But what does God do for us? God places the relationship, us, places a higher value on that than all the money that we owe, all the transgressions we owe. And that's what we have to do. We need to place a value on the person and the relationship before their transgression. That is more important than what they did wrong. Here's your next bullet point. Use the offenses that anger you. Use the offenses that anger you to remind yourselves of the offenses God has forgiven you. You do not want to be a sin counter. You know those people. They are waiting for the day you get into a fight so they can just take out their list. Oh yeah, in 1982, you did this. And then in 1985, you did this, right? You don't want to be that person. When you understand why you are mad, then you don't count the sins. You realize, man, I've done that a million times. I'm just as guilty. Here's your last bullet point. Do not act until the anger has passed. Do not act until the anger has passed. Remember, don't act, don't speak. Respond with gentleness and humility. That is what God demands of us. Respond with gentleness and humility. We don't want to hurt them, and we need to understand that we need to value that relationship more so than ourselves. And I'm going to read two quick passages. You don't have to flip there. I will read it to you. This is Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. It says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. It says, place a value on relationships that is greater than yourself. Love God, love one another. That's what we're supposed to do. Romans 12, chapter 10, again, I'm just going to read it to you. Be devoted to one another in love. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourself. God commands us to love and to place a huge value on that. You see, anger was never meant to be divisive. It wasn't meant to divide us. Like physical pain, it's meant to warn us of dangers to our relationships. And by stepping away, reflecting on what's making us angry, the pain that it's causing us, and always acting in love, we have a chance to undo the rage in our lives and live in peace, the peace and joy that God offers. Here's your simple truth. Feeding anger leads to hurt and regret. Feeding anger leads to hurt and regret. Using anger the way God intended, strengthens your relationships with God and with others. It is a choice. Choose wisely. Choose wisely. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for bringing everybody here today. You command that we be in fellowship with one another. And I thank you for everyone in the room. Lord, I pray that today you give us patience. Patience that in the midst of anger that we can step away, have the self-control to step away so that we don't add to the hurts that happen in our lives. Lord, I pray that you grant us insight to understand the pains that happen as a result of the anger, so that when we come back to that person in that relationship, it'll help us focus on the individual. Lord, I pray that you allow us to place value on relationships, our relationship with you and our relationship with one another. I'm going to ask that you guys take a minute. Take a minute and think about how you have been responding to anger. What have you done with it in the past? And think about how different your life would be if you acted in biblical principles. If you use that to make your relationship better, more comforting, safe, how would your life be different? Take a minute and think about that.